I'd like to thank all of you for coming and welcome to the 2018 Distinguished Home Awards program. I want to thank all of the winners who are here today. I'd like to thank all of the other Lake Bluffers that are here today. So it's going to be a nice show. I'm going to try and go through this fairly quickly because of the Bill Hart service that's going on over at the fire station. So we're going to kind of zip along a little bit. My name is Paul Bergman. I'm a lifelong resident of Lake Bluff. I grew up in this town. I've been on the Lake Bluff History Museum board for probably way too long. I can't remember how long I've been on the board. And we've been running the Distinguished Home Awards program for about 12 years now. We have put up over 50 signs. We have over 50 awarded houses, and we have over 50 signs that we've put up in Lake Bluff. Do you all like how Lake Bluff has bloomed in signs with all of the historic home award signs? I hope you enjoy that. In the most basic terms, we at the Lake Bluff History Museum are interested in history and we're interested in telling stories. And part of telling the stories is to celebrate the architecture and to share the history that we understand about our village. In 2005, we made our opening comments to this program they go this way. In the most basic terms, we at the Lake Bluff History Museum are interested in telling stories. In order to tell these stories, to share the history, it follows that we have to have a deep interest in our sense of time and place. It could be great architecture, it could simply be a timeless visual setting, it could be the unique effort of a homeowner, or simply be a location where an important story may have taken place. Each of tonight's honorees and their properties has contributed in some way to that sense of Lake Bluff. That Lake Bluff is a very special place where interesting stories have taken place and continue to take place. We said that in 2005, and we think that's still true today. It's still part of our community. So, in general, we go through the judging process, and we generally try to follow the National Park Service guidelines. This is the National Historic Register guidelines for nationally recognizing houses. But we also put a bit of a Lake Bluff spin on it, in that we have also created an award called a Heritage Award that we use for houses that are very special to our sense of Lake Bluff, or represent what we call Lake Bluff-centric architecture. We award homes based on the National Register guidelines. There are 5 architectural categories: preservation, restoration, renovation, infill, and adaptive reuse. And we have an adaptive reuse property today. We also added the extra category for the Heritage Award, which I just mentioned. Our judging committee consists of current or past members of the board: Kathy O'Hara, Lynn Grenier, Jeannie Jirch, Nan Caldwell, and myself are the board members that are on the board. Nan Caldwell and Jeannie are on their second year of being part of the committee. They bring a very neat level of energy and point of view to this. And Beth Kepper, standing over here, is a former board member and was actually the founder of our Distinguished Home program. A little bit about the process. We always have too many houses to choose from. We're always being asked the question now, well, what about this house? What about that house? Well, chances are we have looked at it and we just haven't gotten there yet. We have about 6 awards that we award every year. We are awarding 6 plus 1 this year, which I will explain when we get to the 7th house. But one of the things that's so exciting about being part of this process in going through the judging process is to listen to the variety of viewpoints that we get from all of our committee members. Some of our members know a great deal about history, others know a great deal about architecture. They all have varied points of view and all have different ideas about what constitutes this Lake Bluff character thing. So we have lots of experience, lots of expertise. We also have some fairly strong discussions and some fairly strong viewpoints on all of this. So we always like to start with the question of what drives our passion for this community. Yes. What is it about Lake Bluff that we like so much? We are looking for, with our Distinguished Home Awards, homes that demonstrate and preserve that general and somewhat undefinable ideal of character in Lake Bluff. Now that's different than the characters in Lake Bluff. We have plenty of characters in Lake Bluff. So the village of Lake Bluff has a marketing plan that markets Lake Bluff, but we also want to take a little closer look at that indefinable thing. We're a small town, yet remarkably sophisticated. We are a very conservative town, but at the same time very progressive. Often Lake Bluff appears to be from a different era, but we all live in the here and now. So there's a great deal of passion and tension that goes back and forth when we're talking about Lake Bluff. And we try and preserve the heritage, the character, the streetscape, and that personable feel of Lake Bluff. And if we continue to tear down 5% of the houses in Lake Bluff every year, we're not going to have much old character, much old history to talk about if we continue doing this. But Lake Bluff is full of fine architecture, and all we have to do is open our eyes and look at it, and we will see that it's there. Some comments that come from our committee that we ask while we're going through the judging process. One of our favorite questions is, would the original owner still recognize the house today? Another question is it part of our history? Is it a part of Old Lake Bluff? And so we ask questions like that. Would the original owner still know where they were if they walked down the street? So Lake Bluff breaks down into a couple of different eras that we like to discuss. We have the settlers era, we have the camp meeting era when the Methodists were running the Chautauqua. Then we go to the country club era. Then we get to the 1920s and into the 1940s, which is when Lake Bluff converts to a suburb where people are living here and commuting downtown. And then finally the post-World War II build-out. So let me also emphasize that the Distinguished Home Award is a purely honorary award. There are no limitations on what you can do and what you can't do with your property. The Lake Bluff Historic Preservation Commission, which is a board that I sit on, has a landmarking program. If you landmark your property through the village, there are some restrictions and there are also some rather substantial tax advantages. This is a purely honorary award, so I want to make that distinction so that everybody's kind of clear with this. So now let's talk a little bit about the houses. The first house that we have is at 538 East Center Avenue for Ryan and Lauren Tillett. And what we like about this is we think it's an 1890s era house, and it's in many ways a sister house to the house next door that you see on the far side, which is Kathy McKechnie's house, built in about the same era. But there are a number of houses up and down this block that represent Lake Bluff's conversion from the Methodist era to the country club era, and then on into the suburban era where people were commuting downtown. And there's a number of things we like about this house. One, it retains its essential general character from when it was first built. And there's a number of things that we like about the house that are especially unique to it being part of the camp era group. First is this beautiful front porch that wraps around the side. But above the porch, you see this big central gable over the top of it, and then another dormer that fits into the gable that forms this dormer on a gable. This shape indicates its era and indicates what kind of house it is. The other thing we love about it are these little flared eaves that you see up on the dormer and up on the gable end. Next picture. So here's a side view of the house. You can see it has a lovely side yard, and you can see the what we call as the dog-eared gable on the cross gable here. This roof line that's truncated at the moment. I drove by the house earlier this week, and you seem to be doing some renovation work on the house, which is fine. But the house is what we think is still in its essential character for the time period with which it was made. And so we appreciate your house, and could you please step forward, and we'd like to give you your award. Good. So thank you very much. We appreciate that. So we move on to our second house, which is at 569 Maple, and this is owned by Scott and Rose Logue. And this is a very similar house. It's right around the corner from the house we just gave an award to. It's another 1890s era house. It now has an enclosed porch, But it typifies two different parts, two different facets of Lake Bluff that we enjoy. One, it's an 1890 summer house. It's gone through the conversion from a camp meeting house to the country club era to the current era. And then it also is a house that has gone through the do-it-yourself homeowners renovation process. And before there was the DIY movement, give me another slide. Before we went through the DIY movement, there was an awful lot of home carpentry that went on in Lake Bluff. And if you wanted to expand your house, you went out and bought some boards and you started nailing them up. And you'd come home off the train, you'd put your work clothes on, and you'd work till 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And some of the carpentry work was great, and some of it was not so good. And so this house had a huge addition that came this way here, but had none of this overarching piece along the top of it. And so there was just a flat, square, boxy box that was added onto the house to add on the garage. And to say the least, it was not Lake Bluff's finest effort. But the Logues then took over the house and have done this wonderful job of completing the renovations that began on the house. They put this second story on, modified and reorganized the house, and have turned it into a very living household. And one more slide. And this is what we think from our archives, this is what we think the house may have looked like in the mid-1960s. So as you can see, it's undergone a great deal of changes. But so are Scott and Rose here?
I am here.
Oh, good. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
You.
Okay.
Thank you, Bob.
We appreciate it. Good. All right. And part of the neighborhood. So now we get to our third house. This is the Merle's house at 112 East North Avenue. And this is a house that we are re-awarding. Mark and Adrian bought this house, and last year we're so surprised when one of our Distinguished Home Award signs appeared in their front yard. And they called Beth Kepper and said, "Why do we have a sign in our front yard?" And they said, "Well, it's because you live in a very historic home." And they said, "We do? We didn't understand that." And so as our conversations went on with them, we said, well, you really do need an award for your house. And so we have decided to give them a second award. This house is very special in Lake Bluff. The house was built by John Cole, who is the grandson of founders of Lake Bluff. And you hear about the Irish coming up from the ship canal that was dug. And John Cole's relatives are part of that group of Irish that came up here. John Cole was a carpenter, built the house in the 1890s. They built the house in the 1880s. And then the house then began to establish its own history beyond that. Let me have another slide. The house is also the home of the Kelly Club. And the Kelly Club, these guys are down at the beach at the changing house. And you'll see we have more Kelly Club history over here on this column here. But the Kelly Club is a young men's organization. It's made up of high school guys and guys who are just outside of high school, so up in their young 20s. And they're kind of a racy group. And they like having a lot of fun. They smoke, they drink, they carry on. They do everything that their Methodist parents don't want them to do. So the barn behind the Cole house is where the Kelly Club is housed. So not only do the Merles have a historic home, they also now have a historic, somewhat racy barn that they live in. And so this is the home of the Kelly Club. The Kelly Club boys started the Pink Rabbit Ball in the 1890s. They then re-revised the ball in about 1905, 1910, and the Lake Bluff History Museum has then tried to re-revive the Pink Rabbit Ball in the 2000s. It was an invitation-only ball. The girls didn't know who their dates were. They just simply received invitations and then had to wonder who was going to pick them up and take them to the ball. The ball occurred in the front yard of a house down by the beach, but it was a party of great fun and great interest. So I have a little bit of very bad poetry from the Kelly Club. This is the first stanza of about a 30-paragraph poem. The Kelly Club is a jolly club composed of fresh young boys who are happiest when, with a big bass drum, are making lots of noise. And this goes on this way for another 30 another 30 verses. So you can see that, it's kind of fun. So this is what we have. Oh, and one last slide. This is what the house looked like in 1967. So that you can see that the house and the barn have not changed substantially. We know the house has had some new windows and new siding and other things like that. It needs to be revived to live on. But, so are the Merles here? Good, come on up here. So, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Okay, good. So, now, we absolutely insist on you putting the sign up, okay? Please, somewhere near the front door so that all can see it. So now we move on to the estate era. And most people don't realize that there's a substantial part of Lake Bluff that was built into estates. And so we have estates down on Moffett, we have estates north up at Shore Acres and in that area, and then estates out on Green Bay Road. And there's a lot of huge acreage that's been revised. Most of the estate houses have been taken down. Most of them have been, the acreage has been broken up, the houses are gone. What we have here at 713 Ravine Avenue is the servants' quarters to the Stanley Field estate. So, another slide. And this is the Stanley Field estate about 1905. This estate house is south of the Ravine Avenue house across an enormous deep ravine. And this house was on what is now Lakeland Drive. And you can see vestiges of the driveway there, the big tall spruce trees that are there. This house was taken down in about 1965. And so that's the house. Stanley Field was the nephew of Marshall Field. He was born in England and moved here to work at his uncle's store. He worked 6 days a week from 7:30 to 6 p.m. with no special privileges. He worked his way up to become the head of the Field Museum in Chicago. He had a 33-acre estate until he died at age 90 in 1965. Thereafter, the estate was broken up, the main house was torn down. And show me the duplex, please. This is what the duplex looked like shortly after it was built. We think, I was just talking with Marnie, she thinks it was 1912, so then this is about 1915 then. I missed the date on that by about 10 years or so. And so one of the things that we like about it is that it's an adaptive reuse. It converts from being a servant's duplex to being a single family home, and we appreciate all of your hard work. So come on up and let's give you an award. So, all right. Good. Thank you. All right. So then we get to 711 Park Place. This is this is one of the anchor houses for the artists' colony. This house has a playhouse and a theater, or a theater up on the 3rd floor. And so there's this little kids' playhouse that's up there. You can see the Widow's Walk around the top of this Italianate style house. That gives you a view out onto Lake Michigan. And this is part of the artist colony. There's a great deal of activity that goes on in the artist colony in the 1910s and 1920s. The house was built for Otto and Margaret Kreutzberg, and this was closed off to be a children's playhouse. Next slide. Margaret was a well-known painter, and in 1926 she painted this now famous to Lake Bluff mural. Everybody here who went to grade school in Lake Bluff is recognizing it, right? Well, this is the house that Marguerite lived in, and this is the mural that she painted. This mural hung in the now demolished East School. It hung there for 80 years. The Lake Bluff History Museum was key in preserving it and having it revamped, rebuilt, what have you. And it now hangs in the Village Hall up on the 2nd floor. So we're very proud to have preserved it. The mural itself represents the meeting of Father Marquette and Louis Joliet at the North Ravine, which we know as Lilliandale Drive, September 6, 1673. And this is the two explorers meeting with the Potawatomi Indians in the area. So Marguerite continued painting until she moved to Tucson, Arizona, where at age 92, she died in 1978. Part of the artist colony was a list of writers and poets that visited Lake Bluff in the 1910s and 1920s. This area, this little part of the artist colony, another picture please. The artist colony was home to the Little Review published by a woman named Margaret Anderson, who had quite a reputation in town. She smoked in public. She wore pants in public, so quite a racy girl that she was. But she published such authors as Ezra Pound, Ernest Hemingway, and T.S. Eliot in her magazine. So there's a great deal of history that occurs on this street and is part of this. Another slide. Here's a slide of the house in the 1960s. This is an Italianate style house. One of the things we love about it is this front door with this lovely arch and this little Juliet balcony over the top of the house. Those are architectural features that we think are very interesting and very special, and we like those a great deal. And one last slide. And here is an absolutely ancient picture, again about 1910 or so. Your house also would have been built probably about that same time. So this is what Park Place looked like at that point. So it's my understanding that Phyllis Creeder is not here today. So we're going to skip over that. And from there, we're going to go to Lansdowne. And this is a house that we're giving our Heritage Award to. Lansdowne is the stately Georgian house of Harry Beach Clow and Elizabeth McNally Clow. He was a member of the H.B. Clow Plumbing Supply Company, one of the largest manufacturers of ductile iron water pipe in the country. And his wife was heir to the Rand McNally Map Company. And they were the printers of maps and railroad time schedules. The house was designed by noted Chicago architect Benjamin Marshall, who also designed the Drake Hotel. He also designed what you now know as the Cuneo House out in Libertyville. The 21-acre estate was landscaped by noted landscape architect Jens Jensen. We'll take another slide. The property was originally part of the William Ferry Estate, which was a much larger piece of land. And the house is located on Ferry Field, where international polo matches were played in the 1890s through the 1920s. From 1908 to 1910, General Patton of World War II fame was, as a young lieutenant, brought the Army polo team from Fort Riley, Kansas here to play international polo. So this is a very significant piece of property. But this piece of property has had an enormous history since then. After years of relative obscurity, the house was just there behind the bushes and 21 acres, and no one paid much attention to it. It went on the market in 2002 for the eye-popping price of $25 million, which made absolute headlines practically everywhere. At the same time, I was working with the This Old House TV show on their remodeling a house in Lake Forest that my dad's architectural firm had designed. When this house went on the market, the This Old House people called me and asked if I knew anything about the house. As luck would have it, I had been to the open house for this property about 5 or 6 days before that and was able to wax eloquently about the house on the telephone. At that point, the woman I was speaking to from Boston said, "Well, what do you look like?" Which I thought was a surprising question. And then later she explained they were looking for someone to narrate an 8.5-minute long sidebar story to go in the middle of the remodeling story of remodeling the house in Lake Forest. That 8.5-minute clip is over on the side kiosk over there running on a continuous loop. So when we break up in a few minutes, be sure and go over and look at me. I was a lot thinner back then. I'm very surprised at that. So, yeah, this big furry thing. So the property didn't sell for a number of years. Let me have another slide. It was sold to a series of developers who tried to sell the property. The house was updated. The property was subdivided. Here's the house about 1920. We sort of date the house by the car that's parked in the front yard. But you can see this is the Clow house at the time. The great real estate depression hit in 2008. The property went into foreclosure. It's had an enormous history. And we in Lake Bluff began to worry about the house. We weren't sure what's going to happen to the house. The house then, the property re-subdivided again. There was more development. The property has now been filled with houses now, and we were quite worried about the fate of the house. Finally, the Schillings have arrived, taking the house out of the developer's hands, which we're so pleased, and back into private ownership. It only took 16 years for the house to go on the market and close. All of you realtors, you might want to take note, it's 16 years to do that. So come on up, folks, and we'd like to thank you. Good. All right, good. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we're going to get to a more modern house. This is our 7th house, our last house. This is at 345 Crescent Drive. It's owned by Ellard and Lorna Faisler, and they're not here today. So this is our modern house. This house is built about 1940 or so, and it's part of the era where Lake Bluff is converting to a suburb where people live in Lake Bluff and commute downtown to live. And what we like about this house is it's designed by an architect named Jerry Cerny, who practiced in Lake Bluff and Lake Forest from the 1930s through the 1960s. Cerny's work is well recognized for a series of motifs that recur throughout his houses. This is a 1.5-story house, which is typical for Cerny in this period. There's a 1-story, and then the second floor is hidden under this enormously steeply pitched gable roof that's up there. The bedrooms up there, I think it's probably single bedroom and bathroom, are tiny, and they have very low pitched ceilings up there. So you either want to be very short or have it for children up there. So the house, we also like it. One of the other things that Cerny did was he has the central mass of the house is where the living room and dining rooms are. On this side, you have a wing which has the bedrooms on it, and on the other side of the house, there's a wing that has the garages on it. This is typical of Cerny's floor plan designs. Then we have the low slanting ceilings. Then I want to point out some of the details of the house. One of the things we like about it are these low squatty dormers. This is something that Cerny did on a regular basis. The dormers are nice and low and nice and wide. One of the other things that you see are the shingles on the house. The shingles here and the shingles here have a sawtooth effect where they're short and long and short and long. That's another design motif that he does. He also shows you that you can paint shingles and have them stand up and become part of the house. And then, last slide, please. One of the other things that Cerny is absolutely most well known for is turning the garage into looking like something else. So what Cerny did on almost all of his garages was he tried to make the garage door look like a window, tried to make it look like a doorway, tried to make it look like something other than a garage door. And so here you see this wonderful set of windows. You think those might be windows that go up and down, like as a double hung window with big shutters on either side. Cerny is famous for his great big shutters and his use of shutters. So he's trying to mask the fact that this is a garage door. If you see that anywhere in Lake Bluff or Lake Forest, you know almost instantly it's a Cerny house. Here again, you see the sawtooth work on the shingles. And the other thing that Cerny is very famous for is this whole series of gable faces. So you have a triangle, a triangle, a triangle, and then one up there all the way at the top. And these are all architectural components that we like about Cerny's work, and that's what makes him a very interesting architect. This is on Crescent Drive. And Crescent Drive is one of those little streets in Lake Bluff that could easily go on the National Historic Register just by itself, because it's chock-a-block with beautiful little houses like that. So the Faislers aren't here today, so we've come to the end of our presentation program. Beth and I are going to keep up with the Creeders and the Faislers to award their awards, and unfortunately they're not part of this process. But I would like to thank all of the homeowners for all of the wonderful things that you've done to your homes and that you're going to be doing to your homes in the future, hopefully. Well, thank you for participating in our program. I'd like to thank all of the board members from the Lake Bluff History Museum, and I'd like to thank everybody in Lake Bluff for this also.
We thank you too, Paul.
And so thank you. So here we are, another year. And so please put the plaques up on the houses. We want to show them off. And the signs are going to go up every year. They're up for about 2 weeks, and then the little DHA angels come and take them away.